Welcome to Faith and Spirituality in a Time of Crisis. My name is Chris Fuller, and I am the Chief Sponsorship and Mission Integration Officer at St. Joseph's College in Maine. And this is a series of conversations with local faith leaders, as well as theologians, philosophers, and others around the country about how we're adapting spiritually to these changing times. My guest with this episode is Father Paul Sullivan. Father Paul is the pastor of Our Lady of Hope Parish in Portland, Maine. Father Paul, welcome to the conversation. So Father Paul, you are the pastor of Our Lady of Hope Parish here in Portland. And something for our viewers who may be outside of Maine of interest to them is the parish setting here, at least in the Portland area, is a little bit different, right? It's more than just one church. Parishes are comprised of what we call clusters of churches here. So what are the churches that you are the pastor for here and your fellow Jesuits that they serve?
Okay, well, technically, this is cluster 28.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are 28 clusters in the Diocese of Maine, which of course is the entire state. And this cluster started out as three separate parishes. St. Joseph's, which was developed, in the end of the 19th century when the trolleys came and you could move further out of town. St. Patrick's, which is also a fairly early parish, was an heavily Irish parish, and St. Pius X, which actually originally broke off from St. Joseph's, so it's the newest of the three. And we came together about 2011, roughly, canonically to form a new canonical parish. So unlike some places where there are several parishes working together and sharing maybe a pastor, but they're still separate parishes, this is one canonical parish, a parish of Our Lady of Hope. And we have currently two functioning churches, St. Joseph's Church, which is right next to our school, St. Bridget's School, and St. Pius Church. The church, St. Patrick, was eventually closed and redeveloped as another facility. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's combined. But unlike many of the clusters in Maine, which are spread out, the size of a small diocese in some places, this cluster is geographically, the two churches are quite close together, about a mile apart, so we can easily schedule things at one or other places. I know other priests travel 20, 30, 40 miles between their churches. Our parish extends out a ways, but the center is fairly close together. Yes.
That's nice. Now, if I understand correctly, you are originally, as they say here in Maine, from away.
Oh, yeah.
How did you find yourself coming to Maine and working with these parish communities?
Okay, well, as a Jesuit, you go where you're sort of told to go. I first came to Maine in 1977. I was just a young fellow and assigned one of my first apostolic assignments as a Jesuit as a member of the faculty at Cheverus High School. It was what we would call a regent then, someone studying, not yet ordained. And so that was my really major introduction to Maine. I'd been in the state before, but first time living here and liked it a lot. And after I spent 3 years on the faculty, then went off to theology school in California, and then came back. I mean, partly because I wanted to, and part because they needed someone. So I was 4 more years in Portland. And then I have not lived in Portland until 5 years ago when I returned. I've been in other places in Maine. After a couple of stints in high school work, I did go into parish work, and my first parish assignment was in Eastport, Maine. It's far down east along the coast as you can go. A wonderful place there. And then I was pastor for a couple of years in Gardner, which is just outside of Augusta. It was still a separate parish then. And then returned after a couple of other stints, other places, returned here to Maine and to Portland as pastor here at Our Lady of Hope. So how did I get here? Well, I like Maine. I've enjoyed it. I have a history. I am from away, but as I like to say, I have adoption papers from Washington County, so they count me as a member of the family there. And I was happy to be back. Yeah,
that's nice. My career has been in Catholic higher education, and I've worked at now 3 institutions over my career, and every institution has its own character, and that part of that character is the place where the institution finds itself. But what have you found to be kind of some of the enriching qualities and characteristics of serving in Maine?
Well, it's different. I mean, Eastport is certainly very different than Portland. I mean, Eastport has maybe 1,300 year-round people, and Portland, although a small city by large by anybody else's standards, is still pretty large in our world in the metropolitan area. Thing about Eastport I liked is everybody, and you can be involved in many parts of the community outside of the church, as I was. Here, that's not quite so true. But in general, I find, as they like to say, Maine is a collection of small towns, and it is. You can make connections, even with some of our work, at St. Joe's and the Ignatian spirituality uh, group that we've got going. A very few people can make a lot happen. Yeah, for a lot of other people, it's easier to make connections because folks are interested. They're willing to lend a hand. They're willing to become part of something, and 3 or 4 people decide to do something, and it can have an impact here because of the overall size of our communities. That if 3 or 4 people did something wonderful in Boston, it would be nice, but it wouldn't have the same impact.
Mhm.
So there's a multiplier effect here that is really quite remarkable. And
Sure.
folks are nice, folks are nice,
Mhm.
generally speaking.
And that,
Wonderful.
of course, that those kinds of settings, that was my experience in Montana. They
Mm,
result in kind of close knit sense of community, right? You said just a few people can make a difference
right.
in a community, which means then these particular challenges that we're facing, right, have a particular. It's not. It's not a better impact. It's not that these communities are better than others, but it has a different kind of impact on these
Right.
communities than they would say maybe larger parish settings. So, what have
Right.
been some of the challenges that have arisen for you with the onset of the coronavirus, these social distancing measures,
Mhm.
shelter in place? What are the challenges that have arisen for you, and how are you trying to address them?
Well, probably logically, the major one is just being able to be in contact with people. I mean, I find in general, being a pastor in Portland is different than being a pastor in a smaller place because in a smaller place, I pretty much knew everybody by name. I could give, at least in the wintertime when the summer people weren't around, in Eastport, I could give communion to just about everybody by name. And I can't do that here, partly because of we're rotating between a mass schedule and not exactly with the same group of people every week. You might see them once a month because we have 7 weekend masses. So that's part of what we're in right now too, even more so because we can't bring people physically together. What we have done here at Our Lady of Hope is when this first began, we had all the staff, the other priests, or 2 other priests assigned to the parish with me, and the parish staff and a number of volunteers. We called everybody, everybody on our parish census, all the families where we tried to reach them. Some we couldn't get to because phone numbers don't work, but we tried to reach out and let them know we're here. Do you have any questions? Do you have any problems? We collected a short list of people who volunteered to help. If anyone needs help, let us know. We'll help. So we have that resource available if anyone does need that. So that's one. The other is I am very grateful. A few years ago, we made the decision to have live streaming capacity put in at St. Pius Church. That is worth every penny we ever paid for it. And I'm very glad we did it because we can do and we are doing things based there. All our liturgies, all our masses now are at St. Pius so that they can be sent out to as many people who want to join and who have internet access. I know that's not everybody, but it's quite a few. And I've been amazed at the people that are attending from far away, from
Mm.
well beyond Portland and throughout Maine, and even beyond Maine, and in a couple of cases even beyond the United States. So it's that's been kind of interesting to be in touch that way. We also let people know as best we can that our printed bulletin, which is still printed, is available outside St. Pius Church if someone wants to pick it up. So trying to be in touch is the biggest issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it is very different celebrating Mass, celebrating the Easter Triduum, in a church where, well, for daily Mass, I'm by myself. For
Mm-hmm.
Easter, we had 4 Jesuits here, all standing at socially distant, accepted spaces, and one music minister, doing the Easter Triduum, which was it was very different, and I was very conscious of that. For a lot of people, they really wanted to be there, I think of the Easter Vigil. We have people who have done the same reading at the Easter Vigil for 30, 35 years. They really love it. I always do the Genesis reading, and to be aware that they couldn't do it this year. I invited them. I emailed all that crew beforehand. I said, I'm really thinking of you, and I invite you to read along with us as we're reading it, in church, because that means so much to you. So it's contact as much as we can. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Telephone, email, online. Yeah.
Yes, it was in some ways meant in a humorous kind of way, but there were, things going around, like on Facebook, for example, people saying, I'm giving up way more for Lent than I ever thought I'd be giving up when Lent started, right?
That's true. It can be. Well, even not coming to church, people sometimes, that is an act of charity. And we said it at Easter, For Jesus, one of the most important things, honoring God, honoring him, he says, you want to honor God, you want to honor me, take care of each other. That's really what it boils down to. So by not coming as much as you really would want to, by not coming, you are taking care of other people, especially the vulnerable people, people of weaker health who would want to be there. So it's really an act of love and an act of devotion to not come, physically, even though you'd really like to. Yeah,
absolutely. And one of the important parts of theological reflection is the moment we're in. How does the moment we're in inform, right, how we think about our relationship to God? And certainly, to me, in a certain way, it made reflecting about Holy Thursday all the more powerful, like where Jesus not only washes the feet, which we missed this year, but he says to his followers, love one another as I have loved you. And so I think what your comments are really helpful here. They give a context to think about that command from Jesus, right? That this year, the sacrifice we can make for each other, the way we can be servants to each other, is through the sacrifice we've made by sheltering in place. That's the way by which we can, if you will, honor Jesus's command to us to love each other.
Mm-hmm. Sure, that, and not hoarding food or those kind of things, or by being helpful in safe ways to people. Like, I know people bring groceries to their neighbors. They don't visit; they leave them on the step. Ways of reaching out that are helpful, safe, but or even just calling people. I called folks over at one of the congregate living facilities here. Some of them don't have email. Many of them didn't, and they're not able to get online, but we had their phone numbers, and I called them on Easter Monday just to wish them a happy Easter and say, we're thinking of you, and either left a message or in a couple of cases were able to speak. So that's, however we're serving one another. That's really what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not doing that, then all of the masses we attend and foot washings we watch or just don't really mean a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Really, how we do it.
Yes, and then for Catholics, one of the challenges has been, in church teaching, the Eucharist is the source and summit of Catholic life, right? And for Catholics, the Eucharist is, as a matter of substance, we say, the body and blood of Christ. And so there's that particular theological challenge, if you will, in terms of why Catholics come to gather together to worship. So how have you tried to address, if you will, that absence for the members of your congregations?
Well, everything you say is certainly true. We also want to remember that Christ is present in the Word, and we do have the Word that is proclaimed, especially proclaimed in a liturgical setting that way and commented upon. So that's there. We do have, and I've talked about our spiritual assembly. We're not able to be physically in the same room, but we are spiritually together. So the Lord is present in that spiritual assembly when we come together. Mm-hmm. He said, when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, he didn't say in the same room. He said, gathered in my name. So, Christ is present among us. And even at the sign of peace, I will say, when I'm by myself there, if you're with somebody, and some of them may be with family members, we extend appropriate sign of Christ's love and peace. And if you're not, let's just extend right now a prayer of peace to someone. Maybe somebody you know, maybe somebody you don't know, maybe somebody who just desperately needs a little bit of peace and hope tonight. We can offer that. So those kinds of the assembly, the presence of Christ still exists. But you are right. I mean, the Eucharist is very important for us. I mean, I think that's why I'm still part of the church myself. But it's craziness sometimes is the Eucharist is there. And we do incorporate in the Mass, there is that widely used now prayer of spiritual communion. I remember as a kid, it was in the little missals we had when most people did not go to communion. I'm old enough to remember that, before, 1960 or there-ish, most Catholics in the little church I grew up in, I can tell you the Catholics who went to communion every week or every 2 weeks, and there were about 3 of them. Most of us went maybe once a month or every couple of months. That was the practice then. Now the practice is we receive, and we should, receive most of the time, if not all the time. So we stop for a moment of prayer, an act of spiritual communion. And the prayer says, "Would you please come spiritually into my heart?" I alter that and say, "You are spiritually, Christ. You are spiritually in our hearts, in our minds, and we cannot be separated from you that way." But there's no denying it. I mean, the Catholic Mass is really not designed to be ideally celebrated on TV. It's really designed to be done in person. It's some other kinds of religious things can be, but Mass on TV or live streaming is really, it's a second best. It's better than nothing. It's a lot better than nothing, but it's not the same thing. That's right.
Yeah, that's a very helpful reminder too about also the Church's teaching. We call it the real presence, right? That Christ is really present in the Eucharist, but Christ is really present in the Word as it's proclaimed and preached.
Right.
And Christ is really present in the assembly that gathers to worship Him.
That's correct, and we still have those for sure. Well, they have the Eucharist, but everybody can be part of the other two, hearing the Word and being part, even spiritually, part of the assembly. Absolutely.
Yeah. And in my conversation with another one of these conversations, we also talked about gratitude at this time, how to express gratitude perhaps for moments we may not have expected. And I think you're referring to the prayer of spiritual communion, which many of us are now, my generation is now more familiar with, right?
You've heard of it probably.
I'm the post-Vatican II generation,
right.
The first generation after the council ended, that remembers only going to Mass and receiving Eucharist every Sunday, in my experience. But that's in some way allowed us a reclaiming of a kind of tradition from within the Church, right? That has a value in particular moments like this.
Oh yeah, sure. Yes, that's right. And that gratitude, I mean, that's a very Jesuit thing. I don't know if you were talking with another Jesuit, but for Ignatius, gratitude is the heart of it all. And he says you start every prayer with, first of all, by asking for the grace to pray once you've done, which is a gift. And then after that, what am I grateful for? He does the daily prayer, the daily examen, which starts off with gratitude. For what am I grateful for? Where have I experienced joy, life, happiness, enthusiasm, even in little things like it was a beautiful sunny day, or I got a phone call I wasn't expecting. Simple things, non-spiritual things, even. What am I grateful? And I'm, one of the things I was grateful for over the Triduum was being able to be with people that way. We were at least able to gather that way. And I had another incident I was reading by happenstance, but not really by happenstance. It's all grace. An article that mentioned the theologian Jürgen Moltmann, who celebrates his 94th birthday this month. And he wrote some wonderful things, quoting another, saying, in times of danger, that's when salvation can grow. And in times of challenge, And he went on to say, if we were certain that we were going to survive, not only this challenge, but a whole lot of other challenges too, climate change and everything else, if we were certain we were going to survive, we wouldn't do anything. And if we were absolutely certain we would not survive, we wouldn't do anything, because why bother? But since it's an open question, now we have a chance. And now we have a chance to cooperate with God, who always says yes to creation. So I think we are in one of those moments, just like the readings from Scripture during the Easter Vigil, several moments of critical challenge. Which way is it going to go? And I think, collectively, the human race is in one of those now. So it can be it can be enlivening as well as challenging, daunting sometimes, but enlivening.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Jesuit exam, and yes, it was a Jesuit I was speaking to.
I guessed, I
You
guessed that.
mentioned gratitude.
Good, good, good.
You mentioned the Jesuit exam, and are there any other ways that your own Jesuit charism has either helped you in your own personal spiritual reflection on what's going on, or in your ministry to your congregations?
Well, Ignatius is very big on spiritual reflection, upon thinking about what you're doing, about whether it's in the daily examen or other ways of praying, and the fact that this is there is no separation between the spiritual world and our world, very much engaged. One of my assignments before coming here, I spent 4 years on the staff of the Eastern Point Retreat House in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Was a Jesuit retreat house, fabulous place. And I remember thinking there, if I go, and I expected I would go back to parish work at some point, I want to do it a little bit differently. I want to have it focused on the spiritual development of folks in the different programs, different ways we operate. To me, that's a really key part of what we're doing. And I think we're trying to do it here. And with others as well beyond the parish. So yeah, that sense of Ignatius' reflective nature, convinced that the Lord is active and working through our lives, and wants us to be co-partners of His in making the world a better place. And very
Mhm.
yesterday, with all this going on, we had a meeting of our social justice and peace ministry, working on, particularly one focus of theirs right now is immigration and migrants and what's happening to all these people in the midst of this. In some ways, they're being cut out of funding and all of that. So what might we do to locally and beyond to be aware of that? Yeah.
That's good. That's very helpful. A lot of us are connecting perhaps more than we had in the past with friends using technology like this. We're doing, cocktail meetings and coffee meetings with people.
Yeah.
But in terms of the day-to-day challenges people might be facing or struggles, you and your peers in ministry throughout the different denominations and religions are probably encountering more of those anxieties, those concerns. Like you said, they may be dealing with people who are undocumented, people who are low income. What advice might you give us in terms of ways that we might be helpful to communities who are perhaps more stressed and anxious by what's going on than some of us, like myself, who have the privilege to be able to shelter in my own home, still have my job? What ways can we be helpful to these people in these communities?
Well, good question. I know at one of the Good Friday liturgy, which Father Bob Levins was the main celebrant and preacher. He's the rector, the superior of the Jesuit community here, and he had said that we are, speaking for himself, but us, we are inconvenienced, in some of these things. Yes, having to wait in lines as I did this morning at the grocery store. It's an inconvenience. It's not really suffering by any means. Missing people, yes, for sure, but not really suffering. So one of the things I think we can do is to remember that there are people who are more than inconvenienced, who are, whether they're undocumented, who therefore have limited or no access to some of these programs that are being put out by the government, or someone who's been here their whole lives but has just lost their job, or doesn't know when their job is going to come back. So part of it is being aware, and at least I try to consciously, explicitly pray for folks like that at our parish liturgy, so we remember them, And the people who have given me particular, in those phone calls, we collected prayer intentions, and they are written out and placed on the altar, and I mentioned those. On Holy Thursday, by tradition, the offering that night is for the poor. It's not supposed to go to the parish. It's supposed to go to the poor, a rice bowl or other things you might do. So being mindful of the poor and of agencies that serve them, either with financial gifts as we can, or I know in some cases a lot of the regular volunteers at soup kitchens and meal services that still can function in one way or another are elderly and maybe have not been able to go. So I've certainly heard and commend the fact that someone who may be younger now has time because their job isn't functioning as much as it had been, to go and to volunteer some time, because an older person, it's maybe not so safe for them to be there, but they can go and help make that work go on. So ways like that, I think, are helpful. And then what our social justice ministry is working on is approaching, along with others throughout the country, senators and representatives to say, hey, don't forget about these people. Don't let them be lost in the shuffle of trying to help. The ones who are on the margins already, maybe literally on the border, that kind of thing.
That's good. Thank you.
Anyway. Yeah.
That's helpful. So that we can say to people, go online, check your local service organizations, see if they have a need for volunteers, knowing that the principal population of volunteers are usually made up of senior citizens, usually, who are now are more at risk than other populations, and there's an opportunity here to serve your communities.
Right. That could be.
The need is.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Good. Well, thank you, Father Paul. I think this is a good note to end on. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your ministry to your congregations. And I wish you all the many blessings through these challenging times.
Well, and you too, and the work going on at St. Joe's. That's great. Thank you.